Gather round, friends. Pull your cloak a little tighter. Let the fire catch the edges of your face, because tonight I want to tell you a story about a land that bled so much, the earth itself forgot what color sand was supposed to be. This is the story of Pywel. And of the Crimson Desert. You've heard the name, maybe. Seen the trailers, the sweeping vistas, the man with the gray eyes and the wolf's bearing, the dragons circling a sky that shouldn't exist. But the marketing doesn't tell you what this world is. Not really. It doesn't tell you about the 107 times the world ended before you ever picked up a controller. It doesn't tell you about the alchemist and the witch who've been pulling strings since before your ancestors could walk upright. But I will. Because here's the thing about the Crimson Desert, the region, not just the game, it didn't used to be red. Once, it was just desert. Dry, harsh, unforgiving, sure. But the color of bone and sunburnt clay, like any honest wasteland. Then the sky tore open. Artifacts fell from a place the old texts call the abyss, objects of impossible power, trailing light like dying stars. And people, well, people being people, they wanted those artifacts. They fought for them. Not in armies, not at first. Just desperate, scrabbling, tooth and nail fights in the sand. One man kills another for a glowing shard. A warlord takes it from his corpse. A kingdom burns trying to take it from the warlord. And the sand drank it all. So much blood was spilled on those dunes that the grains themselves turned crimson. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Permanently. The desert became a monument to human greed written in a color the earth had never agreed to carry. That was the beginning. That was ground zero for everything that would come. Settle in. We have a long way to travel tonight. Now, to understand what happened in the Crimson Desert, you first have to understand the world it sits inside. Because Pywel, the continent, the whole of it, is not a simple place. It is a single, seamless landmass, and yet it contains multitudes. 5 regions. 5 souls. Let me paint them for you. Hernand, the gateway. Rolling green hills, established towns, merchant guilds run by goblins with ledgers thicker than your arm. This is where newcomers arrive, where House Celeste, descended from a wandering knight named Kanta who crossed barren lands and simply decided to build, holds the duchy together. It looks gentle. It is not. Beneath the surface, bandits peddle a drug called Dreamer's Bliss, pirates led by a man called Sir Catfish raid the coasts, and hidden in a forest village called Pororan, scholars study magic that predates everything. Palin, the northern mountains. Snow-choked peaks, visibility measured in arm's lengths, and the ancestral home of 3 warring clans, the Greymanes, the Black Bears, and the Lonely Jackals. The Greymanes were the noble ones, protectors, swordsmen, heroes for hire. The Black Bears were led by a man called Myrdin. We'll get to him. Oh, we'll get to him. Demonis, the political heart. Grand palaces, clockwork spires, a royal house rotting from the inside. King Edward Thorell lies unconscious and airless, and the vultures are circling. We'll talk about the Blood Coronation soon enough. Delegia, and this one surprises people. Technology. Real, advanced, mechanical technology, in a high fantasy world. A genius named Marnie, from an exiled noble house, opened a new era here. Robots. Rockets. Mechanical tanks. He holds knowledge about the abyss that could change everything, and a weapon that could end a tyrant. And then there is the Crimson Desert itself. Holy cities where pilgrims worship a god called Adama. Settlements built on gambling and desperation, where men without coin fight in something called the Bone Pit for a chance at survival. Gateway villages where they study the night sky and the lore of dragons. And everywhere, the red sand, whispering of the blood that made it. 5 regions. 1 continent. And threading through all of it, like veins through a body, the power of the abyss. But before we can talk about the abyss, we have to talk about a man. A man named Jian. You know how it goes in the mountains, don't you? 3 clans, 3 ways of living, and only enough snow and stone for one. The Greymanes were the protectors, skilled swordsmen, merciful, loyal to a fault. The Black Bears were wild, aggressive. Led by Myrdin, a man who fought with the relentlessness of an angry bear, and I do not use that metaphor lightly. And the lonely jackals, led by a man named Ludwig, opportunists whose loyalties, and I quote, change with the wind. These 3 clans bled each other for generations. And then came Jian. Jian was different. A leader, not a conqueror. A unifier, not a tyrant. Through diplomacy, through strength of character, through something that looked very much like love for his people, all his people, he brought the 3 clans together. Under one banner. One peace. The Greymanes were his valued allies, he wrote in his journal. He had plans, send Greymanes to Hernand, forge alliances with Delesia, reach out to distant Selphade. He was building something real. And for a while, it held. The mountains knew peace. But Jian made mistakes. 2 of them. Fatal ones. First, he learned that the Black Bears were consorting with powers beyond our borders. Dark powers. Abyss-touched powers. And he didn't act. Whether it was mercy, or denial, or simply the belief that diplomacy could fix anything, he didn't act. Second, he overlooked Ludwig. The Jackal King. A man who envied the Greymanes with a quiet, corrosive hatred, the kind that doesn't shout, but seethes. And so it was that one night, the Black Bears struck. A surprise raid. Myrdin's fury unleashed. Ludwig's jackals at their side, blades drawn against the very peace they'd sworn to uphold. Jian was assassinated. And just like that, the mountains bled again. The peace that one man had built with his bare hands and his beating heart was torn apart in a single night. Citizens enslaved. Clans scattered. The Greymanes, those proud, noble protectors, hunted like animals across the continent. And one of those Greymanes, one of them was going to matter more than anyone could possibly imagine. His name was Kliff Macduff. And they call him the Grey Wolf. Now, I need you to understand something about Kliff, because everything about him, everything, is going to matter later in ways you cannot yet imagine. He was a Greymane. One of the best. Jian himself said Kliff was a key figure in Paylun's future. A skilled warrior. Morally grounded. Fiercely loyal. And yet, there's always been something off about him. Something people noticed but couldn't name. But we'll come back to that. When the Black Bears ambushed the Greymanes, Kliff was there. Fighting. Dying. Myrdin himself found him, the Bear King facing the wolf, and the fight was over before it began. Myrdin struck Kliff down, mortally wounded him, and then threw his body into the river. Left him for dead. But the river had other plans. Deep beneath the surface, something stirred. Energy from the abyss, ancient, strange, neither good nor evil but simply powerful, reached up and touched Kliff's broken body. His wounds closed. His heart, which had stopped, began to beat again. He woke on a bank in Hernand, pulled from the water by a stranger. Alive. Changed. And here's what strikes me as strange, friends. Here's what should have raised questions in Kliff's mind but didn't. He'd been dead. He'd been stabbed through the chest by the most dangerous man in Paylun and thrown into a freezing river. And he woke up alive. And he didn't question it. Not really. He just moved forward. Survived. Found work in Hernand. Gambled for coin. Bought fine clothes to get into the castle. A man with no past, no clan, no answers, and, if we're being honest, no apparent curiosity about any of it. Think about that. Hold on to it. Because it is the single most important detail in this entire story. Kliff Macduff is a man without emotions. And that is not an accident. Above the surface of Pywel, above the mountains and the deserts and the palaces and the war, there exists another world. They call it the abyss. Floating islands, suspended in an otherworldly void. Ethereal pathways of light connecting ruins older than memory. This is not a place of evil, not inherently. The old texts call it the cradle of providence, the source from which divine order flows into the world below. Others call it Masek Mavdal. It is ancient. It is powerful. And it is broken. Because living inside the abyss, or perhaps being the abyss, is an entity called Umbra. Umbra is not a god. Not exactly. Umbra is pure power. Raw, godlike, and utterly indifferent to mortal suffering. And its energy leaks. It spills out of the abyss and falls to the surface as what the world calls abyss artifacts, objects of terrible power that land in Pywel like seeds of corruption. And here's the cycle. The terrible, elegant, inescapable cycle. Umbra's energy spills as artifacts. Power-hungry people seek them out. Their dark desires, their greed, their cruelty, their ambition, seep back into the abyss through the artifacts. That corruption feeds Umbra, twists it further, makes it worse. And Umbra, now more corrupt, spills even darker energy. And the cycle continues. And continues. And continues. Until the world ends. Until everything collapses. Unless someone breaks the cycle. And that, dear listeners, is where our story truly begins. In the neighboring kingdom of Demonis, a man named Gabriel Caliburn was once regarded as upright. Virtuous. A paragon of noble virtue. Once. But power does things to a man. Or perhaps, something else does things to a man through power. King Edward Thorel, the rightful ruler, lay unconscious. No heir. No successor. And into that vacuum stepped Caliburn. Not with diplomacy. Not with politics. With a massacre. They call it the Blood Coronation. In the great palace of Demonis, Gabriel Caliburn murdered every last one of King Thorel's loyalists. Every man and woman who stood for the old order. And when the blood had pooled on the marble floor, thick, dark, spreading, he didn't clean it up. He sat in it. He erected a throne over the pool of blood and took his seat upon it. Duke Gabriel Caliburn. The Blood Duke. A man who may well be an incarnation of Umbra itself. He possesses abilities no mortal should have. He can reach into the vision, that golden helm that lets you see echoes of the past, and pull you out of it. He speaks as though he knows Kliff. As though they've met before. As though this has all happened before. And in the mountains, when word of Caliburn's rise reached Jian, the Unifier made a hasty decision. He rushed to form alliances in response. He took his eye off the Black Bears. And that was the opening Myrdin needed. The Blood Coronation didn't just shake Demonis. Its tremors reached across Pywel, toppled a piece in the mountains, and set in motion the events that would bring Kliff Macduff back from the dead. But even the Blood Coronation is not the deepest secret this world holds. Not even close. Now we come to the truth. The truth that Pearl Abyss hid so deep inside Crimson Desert that most players will never see it. The truth that changes everything you thought you knew about this story. Are you ready? The entire game is a time loop. The main story, Kliff's journey, the Greymanes rebuilding, the battles, the Blood Coronation, the final confrontation with Umbra, all of it represents the 108th attempt by two ancient beings to create a hero capable of defeating Umbra. Permanently. 108. That means there have been 107 failures. The two beings are called a Lustan and White Crow. A Lustan is an ancient alchemist. White Crow is an ancient witch. They are the guardians of the abyss, the self-appointed keepers of what they call providence, the cosmic balance that holds reality together. And for longer than anyone can remember, they have been watching the world end. Over. And over. And over again. Each time the cycle resets, they try something different. They tweak. They adjust. They manipulate. They tried giving Kliff confidence. Result? Excessive competitiveness. He picked fights he couldn't win and died. They tried removing his fear. Result? Reckless behavior. He charged into battles without thinking. Died again. They heightened his sense of responsibility. Result? Aimless wandering. He felt the weight of the world so heavily that he couldn't move, couldn't act, couldn't choose. Wasted away. They enhanced his emotions. Overconfidence. Anxiety. Recklessness. One after another, the same man, the same soul, used as a test subject across 100 lifetimes, each attempt ending in failure. In one cycle, Kliff refused the Abyss's powers entirely. In another, he was corrupted by proximity to Myrdin. In another, the Greymanes were annihilated completely and he had nothing left to fight for. 107 failures. And in a cave, the nest of valor, there is a man called Jian. He is what Kliff became in one of those failed timelines. Trapped in the void, wandering under a different name. And on the wall of his cave, scratched in marks that have been counting for longer than civilizations have existed, is the number 107. He has been counting every single attempt. And then came the 108th. This time, this final time, the Guardians did something drastic. Something cold. Something that explains every strange, unsettling detail about the man called the Grey Wolf. They extracted Kliff's emotions. Entirely. Every feeling. Every doubt. Every surge of joy, every pang of grief, every flicker of curiosity that might have made him ask, wait, how am I alive right now? Gone. Surgically removed by two beings who had decided, after watching this man fail 107 times, that emotions were the variable they could no longer afford. And that is why Kliff doesn't question his resurrection. That is why he doesn't ask why a stranger pulled him from a river. That is why he moves forward with the mechanical focus of a man who has a job to do and no interior life to distract him from doing it. He is not stoic. He is not brave. He is not disciplined. He is empty. By design. And that emptiness, that engineered, calculated, heartbroken absence of everything that makes a person human, is what finally breaks the cycle. But the emotions are just the beginning of what the Guardians orchestrated. Because everything was planned. Everything. Unka, the hulking, ogre-like Greymane who becomes Kliff's most loyal ally? He survived the Black Bear's ambush by design. The Guardians chose him. They ensured he lived so he could pull Kliff from the river, support him, fight beside him. And at the end, when Kliff is lost in the abyss, it is Unka who rescues him. Not by chance. By script. The spears that Kliff removes to free Blackstar the dragon? Placed there. Deliberately. So that when the final battle comes, the dragon would owe a debt and fight at Kliff's side. Wusa and Migu, the Eastern witches who appear suddenly in Chapter 8 with no warning, no foreshadowing, just pop, here we are. Summoned by White Crow from distant lands. The abruptness of their arrival isn't bad writing. It's evidence. And Alustin? The beggar outside Hernan Castle who hands Kliff a strange key and says, virtue paves the path to wisdom before vanishing? That was the Guardian himself, disguised, nudging his creation in the right direction. White Crow first appears as a noblewoman Kliff rescues. Kind. Grateful. Unassuming. Then she reveals herself, I am a guardian of the abyss and a protector of your world's order. As though she's explaining something as mundane as the weather. Jian's death, the assassination that sets the entire story in motion, was necessary. Jian was too effective a leader. With him alive, Kliff was comfortable. Content. A follower, not a hero. The Guardians needed the peace destroyed. They needed the Greymanes scattered. They needed Kliff broken, alone, and desperate enough to accept the Abyss's power without question. The entire world of Crimson Desert is a stage. Every actor has been cast. Every event has been choreographed. And the only person who doesn't know it is the protagonist. So what does it all mean? Why tell this story? Why does it matter? Because Crimson Desert, for all its spectacle, the dragon fights, the mountain battles, the blood-soaked coronations, is asking a question that cuts deeper than any blade. What are you willing to lose, to save the world? Kliff lost his emotions. His identity. His ability to feel joy or sorrow or wonder. He became the perfect weapon, focused, relentless, unshakable, and the cost was everything that made him Kliff. And the Guardians? They lost their humanity too, in a different way. They've watched this man die 107 times. They've rewritten his soul like a rough draft. They've killed Jian, orchestrated massacres, manipulated nations, all in service of a goal they cannot guarantee will work. Are they heroes? Are they villains? They're tired. They're ancient beings doing the only thing they know how to do, in the only way they know how to do it, hoping that this time, this one last time, it'll be enough. And the world of Pywel itself? It's beautiful. It's rich. It's alive with over 100 factions, with hidden villages and mechanical cities and holy deserts and mountain clans. Pearl Abyss built something extraordinary here, a world where the best storytelling is hidden in the menus, where 284 memory fragments reward the curious, where the knowledge system contains layers of lore that most players will never find. The tragedy of Crimson Desert is that its deepest story, this story, the one I've just told you, is buried so deep that you have to complete the entire game and solve every Abyss puzzle just to read 6 books in a library that explain the truth. Most players will never see it. And it is. On the surface. But underneath? Underneath it's a meditation on free will, on the cost of salvation, on whether a hero manufactured by cosmic puppeteers can still be called a hero at all. The epilogue gives us something. Kliff is given wings, beautiful, abyss-crafted wings, and he sets out into the world. Not to fight. Not to conquer. To perform acts of kindness and virtue. To live, maybe for the first time. As though somewhere, somehow, the man who was emptied of everything is learning to feel again. Or maybe that's just what I want to believe. So that's the story of Pywel. The Crimson Desert. The Grey Wolf. The 108th cycle. A world painted red by human greed. A hero hollowed out by desperate gods. A truth buried so deep that you could play for 100 hours and never find it. If this story kept you company tonight, if it made you think, or feel, or wonder, then pull up a chair next time, too. We do these deep dives every week, and we've got a lot more worlds to explore. A lot more fires to sit around. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think the Guardians were right to do what they did? Could you sacrifice one man's soul to save a world? I don't know the answer. I don't think the game does either. And I think that's the point. Until next time, friends. Keep the fire burning.